Welcome to Elizabeth's Stories. Today, we follow Sarah Mitchell, a retired teacher whose family skips her book launch, prompting her to reclaim her worth, confront neglect, and embrace a life-altering truth. Subscribe and hit the bell for weekly stories of self-discovery. Share your thoughts below. Let's start the journey. The air in Morrison's books was heavy with the scent of aged paper and unspoken dreams, a quiet symphony of hope and dust. I stood behind a small oak table, my debut novel, Second Chances, arranged in careful stacks before me. Its cover, a lone woman silhouetted against a twilight sky, felt like a reflection of my own heart, bold in its creation, fragile in its exposure. At 62I, Sarah Mitchell, a retired English teacher from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, had poured 3 years of stolen mornings and sleepless nights into this book, a story of a woman finding her voice late in life, a mirror of my own quiet rebellion. Tonight was meant to be my moment, the culmination of a dream I'd cradled since my 20s, when chalk dust and lesson plans had buried my own words. But as the clock on the bookstore wall ticked past 2:00 p.m., the room remained a hollow echo of my expectations, its silence sharper than any rejection letter. I adjusted my navy suit, the one I'd worn to Marcus's wedding, its crisp lines, a frail armor against the unease coiling in my chest. The bookstore was sparsely populated stragglers, drawn by the promise of free wine and cheese, their eyes skimming the shelves, not my table. A young man in a frayed hoodie approached, his gaze fixed on the stack of bookmarks beside my books. "These free?" he asked, his voice flat, barely glancing at me. "Yes," I said, forcing a smile that felt like a crack in porcelain. "Would you like to hear about the novel?" He shrugged, pocketed a bookmark, and shuffled toward the mystery section. Another man, elderly, with a cane, paused to ask if Second Chances came in large print. I shook my head, my throat tightening. Not yet. I managed my voice softer than I intended. He nodded and moved on, leaving me with the weight of his indifference. These were not my people. My people, the ones whose presence I'd counted on, whose love I'd believed in, were nowhere to be seen. I'd invited 7 souls to this launch: my son Marcus, his wife Jessica, my daughter Rachel, her husband David, and my 3 grandchildren, Lily, Tommy, and Emma. Not a grand crowd, but a sacred one. The threads of my life woven into theirs through decades of sacrifice. I'd raised Marcus and Rachel alone after their father David walked out when they were 12 and 9, leaving me to stitch together a family from the scraps of his absence. I'd taught high school English by day, tutored by night, paid for their college educations, their weddings, their homes. I'd been their rock, their safety net, their invisible anchor. Tonight I dared to ask for their presence, and the empty chairs mocked me with their silence. I clutched a copy of Second Chances, my fingers tracing the embossed title as if it could tether me to the dream I'd built. The bookstore's owner, Mrs. Henderson, a silver-haired woman with a penchant for optimism, refilled my water glass with a gentle smile. "Sometimes the best events are intimate," she said, her voice a soft attempt to cushion the blow. More room for meaningful connections, with whom I wanted to snap, but I held my tongue, nodding instead. The strangers who'd asked for the bathroom's location. Instead of my story, the couple in the corner whispering about the wine selection. I was Sarah Mitchell, the reliable one, the one who showed up for parent-teacher conferences, soccer games, and emergency loans, never asking for thanks. Tonight, I'd asked for something for myself, and the absence was a wound I couldn't ignore. The night before, Jessica's call had been the first crack in my heart. Her voice, polished with rehearsed regret, had drifted through the phone like a cold breeze. "Sarah, I'm so sorry, but tomorrow's not going to work. Beverly's planned this incredible spa day in Des Moines for all the women, me, Rachel, the girls. She's been planning it for months. You understand, right, Beverly? Jessica's mother, who treated my daughter-in-law like a queen and me like a footnote. Beverly, who threw lavish birthday parties for my grandchildren and forgot to invite me half the time. I'd gripped the phone, my voice steady, despite the tremor in my chest. It's my book launch, Jessica. 3 years of work. My dream. I know, sweetie. She'd said the endearment hollow as a cracked bell, but family comes first. Beverly specifically requested the kids. The girls will love it. Family comes first. The irony was a blade sharp and cold. Marcus had gotten on the phone next, his tone clipped, impatient. Mom, you know how important these family relationships are. Jessica's parents have been so good to us. We can't let them down. What about your relationship with me, Marcus? I'd asked, my voice barely above a whisper, the question slipping out before I could stop it. Don't be dramatic, Mom. He'd said his words a slap. It's just a book signing. We'll buy the book later. Just a book signing. 3 years of waking before dawn, of writing in the margins of a life consumed by their needs. 3 years of pouring my soul onto pages while they built their busy, important lives. Just a book signing. Rachel's call an hour later had sealed the wound shut, leaving only scar tissue. Mom, I heard about the spa day, she'd said, her voice hesitant. David and I were planning to come, but now it feels weird being the only ones there. Maybe we should reschedule for when everyone can make it. Reschedule my dream. Reschedule my moment. I'd hung up the weight of their absence pressing against my ribs like a stone. I'd raised them alone, paid $47,000 for Marcus's college, $52,000 for Rachel's, $15,000 for his wedding, $18,000 for hers, $25,000 for their first house, $20,000 for her condo. I'd spent a decade babysitting their children, ferrying them to activities, baking cookies for school events, all without a single complaint. And they couldn't spare an afternoon. By 4:00 p.m., the bookstore was a ghost town. The wine glasses empty, the cheese platter picked over. I'd sold 3 copies of Second Chances, one to Mrs. Henderson, who'd insisted on supporting me, one to Janet Morrison, my former colleague, who'd clapped me on the shoulder with a proud smile, and one to a stranger who'd said she admired my persistence. Persistence. A polite word for desperation, for standing alone in a room built for celebration, surrounded by strangers who didn't care. As I packed the unsold books into boxes, their weight heavy in my arms, a strange sensation crept over me like a shadow, slipping across the room. It wasn't just disappointment, it was something deeper, something alive, as if the bookstore itself were watching me, waiting for me to notice. I paused, my eyes catching a glint of metal on the table, half hidden beneath a stack of bookmarks. A small brass key, its loop ornate, its edges worn, as if it had been carried for years. It hadn't been there before, I was certain. I'd cleared the table myself, arranging every detail with care. My fingers closed around it, the metal cool but strangely warm, as if it held a pulse of its own. Where did you come from? I whispered, turning it over. It wasn't mine yet. It felt familiar, like a memory I couldn't place. Had someone left it here? A careless patron? Or had it been placed deliberately, a breadcrumb in a story I didn't yet understand? The bookstore's lights flickered a brief stutter that sent a chill down my spine. Mrs. Henderson was in the back, tidying up, oblivious to the shift in the air. I slipped the key into my pocket, its weight a quiet question, and resumed packing, my mind racing. Driving home, the boxes of books rattled in the back seat, each thud a reminder of my humiliation. The drizzle outside mirrored my mood, the wipers sweeping across the windshield like hands brushing away tears. My house, a modest 2-story I'd paid off years ago, loomed in the dusk, its windows dark, but expectant as if it knew I was returning changed. I stepped inside the silence, thick broken only by the faint creak of the floorboards. The house felt different tonight, not empty, but alive, as if it were waiting for me to unravel something. I poured a glass of wine from a bottle I'd saved for the celebration that never happened and stood before the mantelpiece, where photos of my family stared back at me. Marcus at his graduation, Rachel in her wedding dress, my grandchildren blowing out birthday candles. In every frame, I was there, but not there on the edge, smiling, but blurred a supporting character in their lives. My fingers brushed the key in my pocket, its edges pressing into my skin. Had it come from this house? From David, perhaps a relic of the life he'd abandoned? Or was it something else? Something older tied to the woman I'd been before I became just mom. I set the wine glass down, a spark igniting in my chest. Not anger, not yet, but a quiet resolve, sharp and unyielding. I'd spent decades being invisible, but tonight something shifted. The key was a mystery, a challenge, a promise. I wasn't just a mother, a grandmother, a retired teacher. I was Sarah Mitchell, and I was done fading into the background. The house creaked softly, as if in agreement, its shadows lengthening as the drizzle turned to rain outside. I moved to the kitchen, pulling out a legal pad and pen. If I was going to rewrite my story, I needed to understand the one I'd been living. I began to write the words, spilling out like a confession, the money I'd spent, the hours I'd given, the dreams I'd deferred. But as I wrote, the key in my pocket seemed to hum a subtle vibration that made my skin prickle. Was it guiding me or warning me? I glanced at the living room where the curtains swayed slightly, though the windows were closed. The house was speaking, and I was listening. I didn't know what the key unlocked: a secret, a truth, or a strength I'd forgotten. But I knew one thing for certain: tonight was not the end of my story. It was the beginning. The bookstore had been a betrayal, but it was also a crucible forging a woman who would no longer wait for others to see her. I sipped my wine, the key, a quiet weight in my pocket, and felt the first stirrings of a power I hadn't known I possessed. Whatever lay ahead, I was ready to face it not as a victim, but as the author of my own life. The house was too quiet, a stillness that felt alive, as if it were holding its breath, waiting for me to unravel the secrets it guarded. I stood in the kitchen, the brass key from the bookstore, now resting on the counter, its ornate loop glinting in the dim light of a single lamp. It hadn't moved since I'd placed it there last night, but its presence was a pulse, a quiet question that refused to be ignored. I was Sarah Mitchell, 62, a retired English teacher from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, who'd spent 35 years as the invisible scaffolding of my family's lives. The sting of the empty book launch lingered, a wound deepened by the absence of my children and grandchildren, who'd chosen a spa day with Jessica's mother over my moment of triumph. But as I stared at the key, its edges worn yet sharp, I felt something stir, a spark of resolve, a whisper of power I'd long forgotten. The wine glass from last night sat untouched, its ruby stains a relic of the celebration that never was. I moved to the living room, where the mantelpiece held a gallery of my life photos, of Marcus at his college graduation, Rachel in her wedding dress, my grandchildren blowing out birthday candles. In every frame I was there, but always on the edge, my smile tight, my presence blurred, as if I'd been an afterthought in my own story. I picked up a photo from Rachel's wedding, my navy suit barely visible behind Jessica's parents, who stood front and center, their smiles radiant. I was there, but not really always present, never essential. The key in my pocket seemed to hum a faint vibration that sent a shiver through me. Where had it come from? It wasn't mine yet. It felt familiar, like a half-remembered dream. Had someone slipped it onto the bookstore table? Or had it appeared by some other means? A message from a past I'd buried. The house creaked softly, the sound low and mournful, as if it were urging me to look deeper. I set the photo down and returned to the kitchen, pulling out the legal pad I'd begun writing on last night. If I was going to rewrite my story, I needed to understand the one I'd been living, a story of sacrifice, of love, given freely and rarely returned. I sat at the table, the pen heavy in my hand, and began to write. The numbers came first cold and unyielding, a ledger of my devotion. $47,000 for Marcus's college tuition, $52,000 for Rachel's. $15,000 for his wedding, $18,000 for hers. $25,000 for their first house, $20,000 for her condo. Emergency loans never repaid, totaling $12,000. And the hours, $500 a year for a decade, babysitting Lily, Tommy, and Emma, driving them to soccer practice, piano lessons, school plays, baking cookies for fundraisers, all while their parents chased careers and dreams I'd helped fund. The total was staggering, nearly $200,000 in direct financial support, not counting the childcare that would have cost thousands more. And what had I received in return? Half-hearted thank you birthday cards, signed with obligation, and the crushing absence at my book launch. I paused, my pen hovering over the page, as Jessica's Instagram post flashed in my mind. I'd seen it last night, after the bookstore's silence had driven me home. My grandchildren in fluffy bathrobes, laughing at Beverly's spa day. The caption, a knife to my heart. Best Saturday ever with our favorite grandmother. Blessed Chakudra family, Chapchintor spa day. Favorite grandmother. Not their only grandmother, but the one who mattered. The one who knew their favorite colors, their dreams, their secrets. The one who wasn't me. The key on the counter gleamed as if it were watching me, its presence a challenge to face the truth. I pressed my fingers to my temples, a dull ache spreading. Had I been too reliable, too selfless? Had I taught Marcus and Rachel to take me for granted by always saying yes, always being there, always smoothing the edges of their lives? I'd raised them alone after their father David left, when Marcus was 12 and Rachel was 9, claiming family life stifled his potential. I'd become both mother and father provider and protector, working double shifts as a teacher and tutor to keep them clothed, fed, educated. I'd never complained, never faltered, but now as I stared at the numbers, I saw the cost, not just in dollars, but in dreams, deferred in nights, spent worrying about their futures. Instead of my own, in the pieces of myself I'd given away. The house creaked again, louder this time, a sound that felt like a nudge. I glanced at the living room, where the curtains swayed slightly, though the windows were closed. My heart quickened. Was it the wind or something else, something tied to the key, to David, to the life I'd lived before I became the invisible anchor? I stood, my fingers brushing the key, its metal, cool yet strangely warm, as if it held a memory of touch. I moved to the mantel, the photos staring back at me, their smiles less certain, their moments less perfect. In one, Marcus and Rachel, as children, their faces bright with trust, David's arm around me, his smile strained even then. Had he left something behind, something more than debt and disappointment? The key felt heavier in my pocket, as if it knew the answer. I returned to the legal pad, the numbers now a map of my sacrifices, but they didn't tell the whole story. There were the quieter costs, the novels I hadn't written, the trips I hadn't taken, the moments I'd let slip because I was too busy being their rock. I'd carried their lives in my hands. But when had they ever carried mine? I thought of the $300,000 life insurance policy David had left me 4 years ago. After his heart attack, a secret I'd kept from Marcus and Rachel, knowing they'd see it as theirs, before I'd even had a chance to decide what it meant for me. Money had always been a siren call for them, a reason to call more often, to visit with expectation in their eyes. I'd learned early to keep it hidden to protect what little I had left for myself. The phone buzzed, shattering the silence. Marcus's name flashed on the screen. His text. Brief. Mom, sorry about yesterday. How did the book thing go? The book thing. 3 years of my heart reduced to a casual phrase. I stared at the words, my fingers hovering over the reply button, but I set the phone down. The old Sarah would have answered, reassured, apologized for making him feel guilty. The new Sarah had no such obligation. Let him wonder. Let him wait. The curtains swayed again, a whisper of movement that sent a chill down my spine. I moved to the window, my hand tightening around the key. The house felt different today. Not just a home, but a witness its walls holding memories I'd buried beneath decades of duty. Was the key David's a relic of his abandonment? Or something older tied to the woman I'd been before I became just mom? I turned it over in my fingers, its ornate loop catching the light, and felt a strange certainty. It was more than metal. It was a question, a challenge, a door to a truth I'd yet to uncover. I sat back at the table, the legal pad staring back at me like a mirror. The numbers were a reckoning, a catalog of my sacrifices, but they were also a release. I wasn't just a mother, a grandmother, a provider. I was a writer, a dreamer, a woman who'd once believed she could be more. The book launch had been a betrayal, but it was also a crucible forging a resolve I hadn't known I possessed. I wrote one final line on the pad, not a number, but a vow. No more fading, no more waiting. It's time to be seen. The house settled its silence, no longer oppressive, but charged like the air before a storm. The key gleamed on the counter, its purpose still a mystery, but its presence a promise. I didn't know what it unlocked, a memory, a secret or a strength I'd buried, but I knew it was leading me somewhere. My family had failed me, but I wouldn't fail myself. I poured another glass of wine, the act deliberate, a toast to the woman I was becoming. The curtains swayed once more, a gentle nod from the house, and I knew this was only the beginning of my awakening. The house was no longer just a house. It was a co-conspirator, its creaks and shadows urging me toward a reckoning I hadn't dared to face until now. I stood in the kitchen, the brass key from the bookstore resting on the counter, its ornate loop catching the early morning light like a whispered secret. It hadn't moved since I'd placed it there last night, but its presence was a pulse, a quiet challenge that refused to be ignored. I was Sarah Mitchell, 62, a retired English teacher from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, who'd spent 35 years as the invisible scaffold of my family's lives. The betrayal of the empty book launched the sting of my children's absence for a spa day with Jessica's mother and the ledger of my sacrifices, $200,000 in financial support, a decade of unpaid childcare, had cracked something open inside me. The key, with its mysterious appearance, was a spark igniting a resolve I hadn't known I possessed. Today I was done being invisible. Today I would rewrite my story. The legal pad from last night lay open on the table, its pages a battlefield of numbers and promises. The coffee in my mug had gone cold, but my mind was sharp, fueled by a clarity that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. The house hummed with a strange, expectant silence, as if it knew I was on the cusp of something irrevocable. I'd spent decades saying yes to Marcus's college tuition, Rachel's wedding, their endless needs, never asking for anything in return. But the bookstore's empty chairs and Jessica's Instagram post, "Best Saturday Ever," with our favorite grandmother, had snapped those chains. I wasn't their favorite anything. I was their convenience, their safety net, their afterthought. And I was done. I picked up my phone, ignoring the blinking notifications from Marcus and Rachel. Their voicemails could wait, apologies too late, excuses too familiar. Instead, I dialed a number I hadn't called in years. "Morrison and Associates, this is Linda speaking," came the crisp, familiar voice. "Linda, it's Sarah Mitchell." I said, my voice steady, though my heart raced. "I need to see Tom Morrison about updating my will. Today, if possible. Sarah, it's been a while." Linda said, her tone warm, but tinged with curiosity. How did the book launch go? I paused the question, a needle in my chest. It gave me perspective. I said, choosing my words carefully. "Can you fit me in this morning? Tom's free at 9:00, she said after a moment. "I'll pencil you in." I hung up and made another call. "First National Bank Trust Department. This is Patricia." Patricia, it's Sarah Mitchell, I said, my voice gaining strength. I need to establish educational trust funds for my grandchildren. Can we discuss the process today? Absolutely. Patricia said, her tone professional but kind. Can you come in at 11:00? I confirmed the appointment and made one more call to Robert Hayes, my financial advisor of 15 years. Robert, it's Sarah, I said when he answered. I want to discuss gifting a portion of my inheritance to my sister Margaret. Can we meet at 2:00? Sarah, you sound determined. Robert said, a note of surprise in his voice. 2:00 works. I'll see you then. By 8:00 a.m., I had 3 appointments lined up. Tom at 9:00, the bank at 11:00, Robert at 2:00. The day stretched before me like a blank page, and for the first time in decades, I held the pen. But as I gathered my purse and coat, my eyes caught the key on the counter. It gleamed as if it had moved closer to the edge, though I hadn't touched it. A chill ran through me. Was it David's a relic from the life he'd abandoned 30 years ago? Or was it something else? Something tied to the house, to me, to a truth I'd yet to uncover. I slipped it into my purse, its weight a quiet promise, and headed out, the October air sharp and bright, as if the world itself were conspiring in my favor. Tom Morrison's office smelled of coffee and old leather, a comforting contrast to the chaos in my heart. He greeted me with a warm handshake, his gray eyes sharp with curiosity. Sarah, you look different, he said, gesturing to a chair. How's the writing life treating you? Like a wake-up call, I said, sitting across from him. My legal pad opened to the list of sacrifices I'd written last night. The book launch was illuminating. I'm here to restructure my will. Completely. Tom raised an eyebrow, sensing the steel in my voice. All right. Let's hear it. I took a deep breath, the numbers from the legal pad etched in my mind. I want educational trusts for my grandchildren, Lily, Tommy, and Emma. $75,000 each for kindergarten through graduate school, but with conditions. They must maintain a genuine relationship with me, letters, calls, visits, not just performative gestures. If they're too busy for their grandmother, they're too busy for her money. Tom scribbled notes, his pen pausing only briefly. That's specific but fair. And for Marcus and Rachel, I leaned forward, my voice steady. $10,000 each. Enough to be kind, not enough to define them. The rest, $50,000 to the Cedar Rapids Public Library for literacy programs, $25,000 to the animal shelter, $25,000 to the local food bank. The remainder, including my house and investments, goes to my sister Margaret in Phoenix. The room fell silent, the ticking of Tom's desk clock loud in the stillness. He set down his pen, his expression serious. Sarah, your estate's worth over $300,000, not counting the house. This is a significant shift. Are you sure? I've never been surer, I said, my gaze unflinching. For 35 years, I've been their maid, their bank, their backup plan. Margaret's been the only one who's treated me like family, not a service provider. She's called every week, remembered my birthday, asked about my book. My children couldn't spare an afternoon for my dream. Tom leaned back, studying me. This is about the book launch, isn't it? I heard from Janet. It was quiet. I pulled out my phone and showed him Jessica's Instagram post, the spa day my grandchildren, in fluffy robes. The caption, Best Saturday Ever with our favorite grandmother. This was posted while I stood alone in that bookstore. I said, my voice low but firm. My daughter-in-law called Beverly their favorite grandmother. Not their only one. Their favorite. Tom's face darkened as he scrolled through the photos. Have you talked to them about this? For years, I said, my voice sharp. And it's always the same. I'm too sensitive, too dramatic, too needy. Well, maybe it's time I lived up to those accusations. He nodded slowly, his pen tapping the desk. I'll draft the documents, but take a few days to think it over. Decisions made in anger can lead to regrets. I'm not angry, Tom. I said, my voice like steel. I'm awake. The words felt like a spell binding me to a new path. I left his office, the key in my purse, a quiet wait, and drove to First National Bank. The trust department's marble floors and mahogany walls exuded a quiet power, a fitting stage for my next act. Patricia Wells, the trust officer, greeted me with a warm smile. Sarah, it's good to see you. Tell me about these trusts. I outlined my plan with precision. $75,000 each for Lily, Tommy, and Emma for education only, kindergarten through graduate school. But they must maintain monthly contact with me, calls, letters, visits. Basic respect. If they're old enough for college, they're old enough to know their grandmother. Patricia nodded, her expression approving. We see families struggle with entitlement. Relationship conditions are effective. How do you define genuine, real effort? I said. Not just showing up for money, but knowing me who I am, not what I can give. If they don't meet the conditions, the funds go to literacy programs. Smart, she said, jotting notes. We'll have the paperwork ready by next week. As I left the bank, the autumn air felt sharper, as if it were cutting away the last threads of my old self. My final stop was Robert Hayes's office, a sleek space of glass and chrome that felt like a portal to a new life. Robert greeted me with a cautious smile, his brow furrowed. Sarah, you want to gift $17,000 a year to Margaret and her husband. That's a significant portion of your parents' inheritance. Are you sure Margaret calls every week? I said, my voice steady. She knows my favorite color, my favorite restaurant, my dreams. My children couldn't name any of those things. They've had 30 years to show up. Margaret deserves this. Robert leaned forward, his eyes searching mine. If this is about the book launch, it's about 35 years of book launches. I interrupted, my voice sharp. 35 years of being their last priority, while being their first call for money or childcare. Start the transfers today. He nodded, his fingers tapping his keyboard. I'll get the paperwork started. But Sarah, this feels personal. Are you okay? I smiled, a slow, deliberate smile. I'm more than okay, Robert. I'm free. Driving home, the trees ablaze with crimson and gold, I felt the key in my purse, its weight a quiet companion. The house greeted me with its familiar hum, the curtain in the living room swaying slightly, though the windows were closed. I froze, my hand tightening around the key. Was it David's hidden all these years? Or something else? Something tied to the house, to me, to a truth I'd yet to uncover. I set my purse down and moved to the living room, where the photos on the mantel watched me like silent witnesses. The house felt alive, its shadows shifting as if it were urging me forward. I sat in my favorite armchair, a cup of tea steaming beside me, and did something I hadn't done in years. I read for pleasure. Not my novel, not a textbook, but a mystery I'd bought ages ago and never opened. The words pulled me in, but my mind kept drifting to the key. It was small brass with an ornate loop, unlike any I'd seen in this house. Had David hidden it here before he left a relic of his guilt, or was it something older tied to the woman I'd been before I became just Mom? The house creaked a low rumble, as if it were answering. My phone buzzed, Marcus again. Mom, how did the book thing go? The same careless text reducing 3 years of my heart to the book thing. I typed back. It was illuminating and left it at that. Let him wonder. The old Sarah would have called, reassured, apologized. The new Sarah had plans. That evening, I called Margaret in Phoenix. Her voice was warm, a lifeline across the miles. Sarah, what a surprise. How are you, honey? I'm waking up. Maggie, I said, a smile creeping into my voice, a long overdue awakening. About time, she laughed. What's the catalyst? I told her about the book launch, the spa day, the years of being everyone's backup plan. She listened without interrupting, her silence a gift. So, what's next? She asked when I finished. Something big, I said, my fingers brushing the key. I'm rewriting my will, setting up trusts for the kids, giving you what you deserve. And I'm starting to live for me. My guest room's always ready for you, Sarah Mitchell. She said, her laughter a beacon. Come visit when you're ready to start that new life. As I hung up, the house seemed to settle, its silence charged with possibility. The key gleamed on the counter, its purpose still a mystery, but its presence a promise. I wasn't just changing my will or my priorities, I was changing myself. The book launch had been a betrayal, but it was also a beginning. The key, the house, my resolve. They were all part of a story I was only starting to write, and I was ready to see where it led. The house had become more than a home. It was a silent ally, its creaks and shadows whispering secrets that urged me toward a truth I'd long buried. I stood in my garden, the late afternoon sun, casting golden slants across the roses, their petals trembling in the October breeze. The brass key, that mysterious relic from the bookstore, weighed heavy in my pocket, its ornate loop a constant reminder of questions unanswered. It hadn't moved since I'd placed it on the kitchen counter last night, but its presence was a pulse, a quiet challenge that seemed to know more than I did. I was Sarah Mitchell, 62, a retired English teacher from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, who'd spent 35 years as the invisible backbone of my family's lives. The betrayal of the empty book launched the ledger of my sacrifices, $200,000 in financial support, a decade of unpaid childcare, and the bold steps I'd taken yesterday to rewrite my will and reclaim my life had ignited a fire within me. But as I stood among the roses, the key's weight pressed against my thigh, hinting at a deeper mystery yet to unfold. My phone buzzed relentlessly, a chorus of notifications from Marcus, Rachel, and Jessica. Their messages had shifted from casual apologies to urgent pleas, tinged with a panic that felt both satisfying and unsettling. Mom, we need to talk. What's going on? Marcus had texted. Sarah, I'm so sorry about the spa day. Let's make it right from Jessica. Her words polished but hollow. Mom, you're scaring me. Please call Rachel, wrote her tone raw with worry. The old Sarah would have rushed to reassure them, to smooth over their unease with apologies for causing concern. The new Sarah let the phone go silent, the garden's quiet hum a balm to my resolve. I'd rewritten my will, set up conditional trusts for my grandchildren, and gifted a portion of my inheritance to my sister Margaret. Acts of justice, not revenge. The key, though, felt like something more, a guide, a warning, a piece of a puzzle I hadn't yet solved. The doorbell shattered the garden's peace, a sharp, insistent ring followed by a pounding that echoed like a heartbeat. Through the window, I saw Marcus's car in the driveway, flanked by Rachel's and Jessica's. My heart quickened, not with fear, but with anticipation. They'd come uninvited, a delegation of guilt and confusion, their presence a response to the seismic shift I'd set in motion. I opened the door to find Marcus, Rachel, Jessica, and David standing on my porch, their faces a tapestry of worry, indignation, and something else, fear, perhaps, of the woman I was becoming. My grandchildren weren't with them, a choice that stung but didn't surprise me. This was about them, not the children. Well, I said, my voice calm as a still lake, this is quite the gathering. Come in before the neighbors start writing their own stories. They filed into the living room, their tension filling the space like smoke. Marcus's jaw was tight, his hands clenched at his sides. Rachel's eyes were red-rimmed, her fingers twisting a tissue into knots. Jessica's posture was defensive, her lips a thin line, while David, always the quiet one, shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting to the floor. The room felt smaller with them, in it the air charged with unspoken accusations. I sat in my armchair, the key, a quiet weight in my pocket, and waited, letting the silence press against them like a storm cloud. Rachel spoke first, her voice trembling but earnest. Mom, we need to talk about what's going on. Marcus told me you're making changes. Big changes. The will that trusts giving money to Aunt Margaret. What's wrong? Why are you doing this? I tilted my head, my gaze steady. Nothing's wrong, Rachel. For the first time in years, everything's right. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, a childhood habit that surfaced when he was overwhelmed. Mom, this isn't like you. Rachel said you're talking about priorities, about things being too late. Jessica feels terrible about the spa day. We all do. But you're acting like we've done something unforgivable. What's happening? I smiled, not the warm, placating smile of the old Sarah, but something sharper forged in the fire of their absence at my book launch. What's happening? Marcus is that I've realized I'm not your maid, your bank, or your backup plan. I'm your mother, and I deserve better than being an afterthought. Jessica leaned forward, her eyes narrowing, her voice careful but edged. Sarah, the spa day wasn't meant to hurt you. Beverly just wanted to treat the girls. Lily and Emma were so excited. It was a family thing, not about excluding you. Family. I repeated the word heavy with irony, its taste bitter on my tongue. And where was I in that family, Jessica? Standing alone in a bookstore waiting for the people who matter most to me to show up for something that mattered to me. 3 years of work, of pouring my heart into second chances, and you chose a spa day with Beverly over me. Rachel's voice cracked, tears spilling down her cheeks. Mom, we didn't know it was that important. You never said it was a big deal. We thought it was just a signing. I leaned forward, my voice low but unyielding. I shouldn't have to say it, Rachel. 3 years of waking before dawn, writing after grading papers, pouring my soul into that book. You're my daughter. You should have known. Marcus shifted his face, flushing with a mix of guilt and frustration. Mom, we're sorry. We messed up. We can do something now. A family dinner, a proper celebration for your book. We'll make it right. It's too late for that, I said, and the words landed like stones, heavy and final. Their eyes widened, a flicker of fear passing between them. The key in my pocket seemed to pulse, as if it approved of my resolve, its weight, a silent ally. Too late. Marcus echoed his voice, rising, a note of panic creeping in. What do you mean, too late, Mom? You're scaring us. I stood crossing to the mantel, where the photos of my family stared back at me, their smiles frozen, their edges curling slightly, as if tired of their own pretense. Marcus, what's my favorite color? I asked, my voice calm but piercing. He blinked, caught off guard. What? My favorite color, I repeated, turning to face him. What is it? I don't know, he admitted, his face reddening. Why does that matter? It's purple, I said, my gaze shifting to Rachel, then Jessica, then David. It's been purple for 30 years. I wear it, decorate with it, mention it constantly. But none of you know that, do you? What's my favorite restaurant? What kind of movies do I like? What do I do with my free time? Rachel's tears fell faster, her voice a whisper. Mom, why are you asking this? Because your mother-in-law, Beverly, knows my grandchildren's favorite colors, their favorite foods, their dreams. I said, my voice steady, despite the ache in my chest. She's their favorite grandmother. But you don't know me. You've never bothered to know me. Jessica's lips tightened, her eyes flashing with a mix of guilt and defiance. Sarah, this isn't fair. We love you. The spa day wasn't about choosing Beverly over you. It was just bad timing. Then why was I excluded? I asked, my gaze locking onto hers, unflinching. In 10 years, Jessica, how many times have you invited me to something meaningful? Not holidays where I'm expected to cook or babysit, but something you wanted to share with me. A girls' night, a shopping trip, anything. Her silence was answer enough, her eyes dropping to her lap. David cleared his throat, his voice cautious the first time he'd spoken. Sarah, we're here now. We want to fix this. Fix what I asked, my voice soft but sharp as a blade. You can't fix 35 years of taking me for granted. You can't fix a lifetime of treating me like hired help instead of a mother. Marcus stood pacing the room, his hands clenched. Mom, you're acting like we don't care. We do. But you're being cryptic, talking about changes and priorities. What's going on? Are you okay? The question hung in the air, laced with a fear I hadn't anticipated. Were they worried about me, or about what I might do next? The key in my pocket felt heavier, as if urging me to reveal just enough to keep them off balance. I returned to my armchair, my hands clasped the key's edges, pressing into my thigh. I've made some decisions, I said, my voice deliberate. I've rewritten my will. Educational trusts for Lily, Tommy, and Emma. $75,000 each for their schooling, but only if they maintain a real relationship with me. Monthly contact calls, letters, visits. Not fake gestures, but genuine connection. The rest of my estate goes to charity and my sister Margaret. You and Rachel get $10,000 each. Enough to be kind, not enough to matter. The room went still, the air thick with shock. Marcus's face paled, his voice barely above a whisper. 10,000, Mom, that's insane. What about the house, your investments? That's our inheritance, no, Marcus. I said, my voice like steel. It's my money, my house, my choice. You don't get to claim what you haven't earned. Jessica's eyes flashed, her voice sharp. Sarah, you can't do this to our family. The kids are counting on that money college funds our house renovation, Marcus's business expansion. I smiled, a cold, knowing smile. So you've been spending my money before I'm dead. How presumptuous. Rachel's tears spilled over her, voice breaking. Mom, are you punishing us? I'm not punishing anyone. I said, my voice softening but firm. I'm rewarding the people who've treated me like family. Margaret's been there for me week after week, while you've been too busy for your mother's book launch. David spoke again, his tone cautious but firm. Sarah, this feels manipulative. Those trust conditions tying money to visits calls. It's like you're holding the kids hostage. I leaned forward, my gaze piercing. Manipulative. Like manipulating me into missing my own book launch for a spa day with your favorite grandmother. Like expecting me to fund your lives while forgetting mine. The silence was deafening, broken only by a faint creak from the floorboards, as if the house itself were listening, approving. Marcus sat down heavily, his head in his hands. Mom, we didn't mean to hurt you. We didn't know how much the book launch meant to you. You didn't know, because you didn't care to know. I said, my voice quiet but resolute. And that's my fault, too. I taught you to take me for granted by always being there, always saying yes, always putting your needs before mine. But that ends now. Jessica's voice was sharp, a last grasp at control. Sarah, you're not thinking clearly. Maybe you need to talk to someone, a therapist, grief counseling. Since Dad died, your father died 4 years ago. I snapped, cutting her off. This isn't about grief. It's about clarity. And I'm clearer than I've ever been. I felt the key in my pocket, its edges pressing into my skin, a reminder of the mystery still unfolding. Was it David's a relic of his abandonment? Or something more, a symbol of the strength I'd buried beneath decades of sacrifice? The house creaked again, a low rumble, as if it were urging me to stand firm. Go home, I said, my voice steady. Think about what kind of relationship you want with me. Not what you expect from me, not what you need from me, but what you want. And if you can't figure that out, you'll have your answer about what I'm worth to you. They stood, their faces a mix of shock, guilt, and uncertainty. Rachel reached for me, her hand hovering, but I step back, my gaze unwavering. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, "but I'm done waiting for you to see me." They left a parade of shaken expressions, the door closing with a finality that echoed through the house. I stood alone in the living room, the photos on the mantel watching me like silent witnesses. The key pulsed in my pocket, a heartbeat of its own. What did it unlock? A secret David had hidden, or a strength I'd forgotten I possessed? I moved to the window, the curtains swaying slightly, though the air was still. The house was speaking, and I was listening. I sat back in my armchair, the key in my hand, its metal warm, now as if it had absorbed my resolve. The confrontation had been a crucible, forging a woman who no longer feared her own power. The key was a mystery, but so was I, a woman who'd been invisible too long now, ready to step into the light. Whatever came next, I was ready not just to confront my family, but to uncover the truths they'd buried, and the ones I'd buried myself. The house had become a living entity, its walls and shadows pulsing with secrets that seemed to breathe in time with my own heartbeat. I stood in the kitchen, the brass key from the bookstore now resting on the table, its ornate loop catching the dim light of a single candle. It had moved again yesterday on the counter this morning, tucked inside a drawer I hadn't opened in years, nestled among old recipes and forgotten birthday cards. The movement sent a shiver through me, as if the key were a guide leading me toward a truth I wasn't sure I was ready to face. I was Sarah Mitchell, 62, a retired English teacher from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, who'd spent 35 years as the invisible foundation of my family's lives. The betrayal of the empty book launched the ledger of my sacrifices, $200,000 in financial support, a decade of unpaid childcare, and the confrontation with Marcus, Rachel, and Jessica 3 days ago had forged a new resolve in me. The key, with its mysterious migrations, was a catalyst, urging me to uncover what lay buried in my past. The confrontation had left my family shaken, their faces pale, with the weight of my rewritten will and the truth of their neglect. I'd demanded genuine love, not obligation, and their silence since then was a heavy presence in the house, like a storm waiting to break. The key, though, refused to let me linger in their absence. It demanded my attention, its strange movements a riddle I couldn't ignore. Was it David's, a relic of the man who'd walked out 30 years ago? Or something more, a symbol of a strength I'd buried beneath decades of sacrifice? The house creaked softly, a low, mournful sound, as if it were urging me to look deeper. I picked up the key, its metal cool, yet strangely warm, as if it held a memory of touch. The house felt different today, not just a home, but a witness, its walls holding secrets I'd buried beneath years of duty. I moved to the living room, where the photos on the mantel watched me. Marcus at his graduation, Rachel in her wedding dress, my grandchildren blowing out birthday candles. In every frame, I was there, but not there. A blurred figure on the edge, my smile tight, my presence an afterthought. The key pulsed in my hand, a quiet heartbeat, and my eyes were drawn to the attic door, a narrow portal I'd avoided since David left. His belongings, boxes of papers, old clothes, forgotten dreams had been banished there, a tomb for the life we'd once shared. The attic stairs creaked under my weight, each step a heartbeat, echoing in the dim light. The air was thick with dust and memory, the scent of old paper and regret. Cardboard boxes lined the walls, labeled in David's precise handwriting, taxes 1985, Marcus's schoolwork miscellany. My fingers brushed the key, its edges sharp, and I scanned the room, my gaze landing on a small black safe, tucked in the corner, half hidden behind a stack of books. It was dented, its surface dulled by time, with a keyhole that matched the key's shape. My breath caught. How had I never noticed it? Or had I, and chosen to forget bearing it beneath the weight of my responsibilities? I knelt before the safe, my hands trembling, as I inserted the key. It turned with a soft click as if it had been waiting for me all along. Inside was a single manila envelope yellowed with age sealed with wax that bore David's initials, DM. My heart pounded a mix of dread and anticipation. What had he hidden here in this house I'd made my own? I broke the seal, my fingers unsteady, and pulled out a letter and a stack of financial documents. The letter was written in David's hand, the ink faded, but legible, dated 4 years ago, just before his death from a heart attack. Dear Sarah, if you're reading this, you found the key, and that means you're ready for the truth. I was a coward, leaving you and the children to chase a life I thought I deserved. I failed you, failed Marcus, and Rachel failed myself. But I watched from a distance through mutual friends, through letters you never knew I read. You were the strength I never had carrying our family through years I abandoned. I saw how Marcus and Rachel leaned on you not as a mother, but as a crutch, a bank, a shadow they took for granted. It broke my heart, but I had no right to intervene, not after what I did. This safe holds my atonement, $847,000 from my life insurance and investments set aside for you alone. Not for Marcus or Rachel, not for their debts or dreams, but for you, Sarah, to live the life you deserve. Use it to write more books, to travel, to be the woman you were before I dimmed your light. But I have one request. Only share this with our children. If they prove they love you not for what you can give, but for who you are. If they can't let this money be your freedom, not their entitlement. I'm sorry, Sarah. I hope this finds you in time to start again. David. I sat back the letter, trembling in my hands, tears blurring the words. David had seen me, seen my sacrifices, my invisibility, my pain, when I thought he'd forgotten me entirely. The financial documents confirmed his words. A life insurance policy, investment accounts, all in my name, totaling $847,000. It was a fortune, a lifeline, a secret he'd kept until now. But why the key? Why hide it in plain sight, only to reveal itself when my heart was raw from betrayal? The house creaked a low rumble, as if it shared my shock. Had David planned this, knowing I'd need a catalyst to break free? Or was the key's movement something else? Something beyond him, beyond reason? The attic felt alive, its shadows shifting as if the past were watching me decide my future. I descended the stairs, the letter and documents clutched to my chest, and sat at the kitchen table. The candle flickered, casting long shadows across the room. The key, now back on the table, gleamed as if it knew what I'd found. David's words were a mirror reflecting a truth I'd buried. I was more than a mother, a grandmother, a provider. I was a woman with dreams, with power, with a story yet to write. The $847,000 was a gift, but it was also a challenge to live for myself, to demand love that wasn't transactional, to unlock the woman I'd buried beneath decades of sacrifice. The phone buzzed, shattering the silence. Marcus's name flashed on the screen. His text, urgent. Mom, we need to talk. We're coming over tonight. I didn't respond. They'd come, but not because they'd changed. They'd come because of the trusts, the will, the money they sensed slipping away. The letter confirmed what I'd felt. They saw me as a resource, not a person. I slipped the letter and documents into a drawer, the key back into my pocket, its weight grounding me. The house settled its silence, charged with possibility. The doorbell rang at 6:00 p.m., and I opened it to find Marcus, Rachel, and Jessica, their faces a mix of determination and unease. David stood behind them, his silence a familiar retreat. My grandchildren weren't with them, a choice that stung but didn't surprise me. I invited them in, the key, a quiet weight in my pocket, the letter hidden in the drawer. What's this about? I asked, my voice calm but unyielding, as I led them to the living room. Marcus spoke first, his tone cautious but urgent. Mom, we've been thinking about what you said. We messed up. We want to make things right. How I asked, my eyes searching theirs, looking for sincerity. What does right look like to you? Rachel's voice was soft, almost pleading. We want to be a family again, Mom. No more spa days, no more excuses. We'll be there for you. I leaned back in my armchair, the key's edges pressing into my thigh. Words are easy, Rachel. You've always been good at words. But I need actions. I need you to know me, not just need me. Jessica's eyes narrowed, sensing the shift. Sarah, are you hiding something? The trust's the will. It feels like you're holding something over us. I smiled, a slow, deliberate smile. Maybe I am Jessica, or maybe I'm just holding on to myself for the first time in 35 years. Marcus's face tightened, his voice raw. Mom, you're different. It's scaring us. What's going on? I stood my hand brushing the drawer where the letter lay. The house creaked a soft rumble, as if it approved. I'm waking up. I said, my voice steady. And I'm done waiting for you to see me. They sat in stunned silence, their eyes searching mine for the mother they'd known, the one who'd always said yes, always forgiven. But that Sarah was gone. The key in my pocket felt alive, pulsing with possibility. David's letter was a gift, but it was also a challenge to live for myself, to demand love that wasn't transactional, to unlock the woman I'd buried. As the house settled around me, its shadows softer now, I knew this was only the beginning. The key had opened one door, but there were more waiting secrets, truths, and a strength I was only starting to claim. The house was no longer a mere shelter, it was a living presence. Its creaks and shadows whispering secrets that seemed to pulse in rhythm with my own heart. I stood in the kitchen, the brass key from the bookstore resting on the table, its ornate loop catching the morning light like a beacon of unanswered questions. Since finding David's letter and the $847,000 hidden in the attic safe, the key had remained still, its mysterious migrations first on the bookstore table, then in a book, then a drawer, seemingly paused. Yet its presence lingered, a quiet hum that suggested it had more to reveal. I was Sarah Mitchell, 62, a retired English teacher from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, who'd spent 35 years as the invisible foundation of my family's lives. The betrayal of the empty book launched the ledger of my sacrifices, $200,000 in financial support, a decade of unpaid childcare. The bold rewriting of my will, the confrontation with my family, and the discovery of David's letter had forged a new resolve in me. But the key, with its enigmatic weight, hinted at a deeper truth, one I was only beginning to uncover. 3 days had passed since I'd faced Marcus, Rachel, and Jessica, their faces pale with the shock of my rewritten will and the truth of their neglect. I'd demanded genuine love, not obligation, and their silence since then was a heavy presence, like a storm cloud waiting to burst. David's letter, hidden in the kitchen drawer, was a lifeline, a fortune, and an apology from the man who'd abandoned us 30 years ago. But it was also a mirror reflecting a truth I'd buried. I was more than a mother, a grandmother, a provider. I was a woman with dreams, with power, with a story yet to write. The key, though, still now seemed to watch as if it knew what lay ahead. I sipped my tea, the steam curling like a question mark, when the phone rang, shattering the morning's quiet. It was Margaret, my sister in Phoenix, her voice warm, but laced with urgency. Sarah, I need to see you. Can I come up tomorrow? Margaret, what's wrong? I asked, my heart tightening. She'd always been my rock, the one who called every week, who knew my love for purple and Greek food, who'd begged me to visit for years. It's not about me, she said softly, her tone heavy with concern. It's about you. I read your last email, and there's something you didn't say outright. I'm worried. I frowned, setting down my cup. What do you mean? Just trust me, Sarah, she said, her voice firm. I'll be there tomorrow. Don't tell the kids yet." Her words hung in the air, a cryptic warning that stirred the same unease I'd felt when the key first appeared. What had she seen in my email I'd written about the book launch, the spa day, my resolve to change, but nothing more? Or had I... The house creaked a low, mournful sound as if it knew something I didn't. I glanced at the key, its stillness unnerving, and felt a chill. Was it done with me, or was it waiting for the next secret to unfold? Margaret arrived the next day, her suitcase barely unpacked before she pulled me into the living room. Her eyes, so like our mother's, were heavy with worry. "Sarah," she said, taking my hands, "you mentioned feeling tired, short of breath, losing weight. You said it was stress, but I called Dr. Ellis. He told me about your diagnosis. Why didn't you tell me?" The room tilted the air, thinning. "Dr. Ellis, my oncologist. 6 months ago, a routine checkup had revealed pancreatic cancer stage 3. 6 months to live, maybe less. I'd stopped chemotherapy after one round, choosing quality over quantity, unwilling to trade my remaining days for pain. The book launch, I realized now, had been my farewell, a celebration of my life's work, a chance to see my family one last time before the end. Their absence had cut deeper because of it, a wound I hadn't named until now. "I didn't want to burden you," I said, my voice barely a whisper, tears stinging my eyes. "You're always so strong, Maggie. I thought I could handle it alone." "You're not alone," she said, her voice fierce, her grip tightening. "You've never been alone. But you've been carrying everyone else's weight for too long. Why didn't you tell Marcus and Rachel?" I laughed, a bitter sound that echoed in the quiet room. Because they wouldn't have come to the book launch, even if they knew. They'd have made excuses, said they were too busy or worse, shown up out of pity. I wanted them there because they loved me, not because I was dying. Margaret's eyes filled with tears, but her voice was steady. "Sarah, you're not dying yet. You're fighting whether you know it or not. And you're going to tell them. They need to know who you are, not just what you've done for them." The house creaked again, a soft rumble, as if it agreed. I pulled the key from my pocket, its weight grounding me. "Maggie, there's something else," I said, and showed her David's letter. Her eyes widened as she read, her fingers tracing his words. The $847,000, a silent testament to his regret. "He saw you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Even from a distance, he saw what they couldn't." "He saw too late," I said, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. "But I'm not waiting for them to see me anymore. I've set up trusts for the grandchildren, $75,000 each, but only if they build a real relationship with me. Not out of guilt, not for money, but because they want to know their grandmother." Margaret nodded, her smile bittersweet. "You're not punishing them, Sarah. You're teaching them." The doorbell rang, sharp and insistent, and my heart sank. Marcus, Rachel, and Jessica stood on the porch, their faces a mix of determination and unease. David lingered behind his silence, a familiar shadow. Margaret squeezed my hand. "Tell them," she whispered. "Let them see you." I invited them in the key, back in my pocket, David's letter still hidden in the drawer. The living room felt smaller, the air thick with anticipation. I sat in my armchair, the key's edges pressing into my thigh, and waited. Rachel spoke first, her voice trembling. "Mom, we've been talking. We want to make things right. No more excuses, no more spa days. We're here." I studied them, their eyes searching mine for the mother they'd known, the one who'd always forgiven, always said yes. But that Sarah was gone. "Before you say anything else," I said, my voice calm but unyielding, "there's something you need to know." I took a deep breath, the weight of the truth heavy but freeing. 6 months ago, I was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Stage 3. The doctors gave me 6 months, maybe less. The book launch was my goodbye, a chance to share my heart with you before I go. and you weren't there." The room went still, their faces frozen in shock. Rachel's hand flew to her mouth, tears spilling over. Marcus's jaw tightened, his eyes wide with disbelief. Jessica's composure cracked her voice, barely a whisper. "Sarah, why didn't you tell us? Because I wanted you to love me for me, not because I was dying." I said, my voice steady, despite the ache in my chest. "I've spent 35 years being your mother, your bank, your babysitter. But I'm more than that. I'm a writer, a dreamer, a woman with a favorite color. You don't know a life you've never bothered to see. If you want to be my family, you need to show it not out of guilt, not for money, but because you want me in your lives." Marcus's voice broke his hands, shaking. "Mom, we didn't know. We thought you were fine. You thought I was invisible," I said, my gaze piercing. "And I let you think that because I was always there, always giving. But I'm not invisible anymore. I've set up trusts for your children, $75,000 each for their schooling, but only if they know me, love me, not just my money. And if you can't do that, you'll lose more than an inheritance. You'll lose me." Jessica's eyes flashed a mix of fear and defiance. "Sarah, this feels like a game. You're holding your illness over us just like the money." I smiled a slow, knowing smile. "It's not a game, Jessica. It's a choice. You've had 30 years to choose me. Now it's my turn to choose myself." The house creaked a soft rumble, as if it approved. The key in my pocket felt warm, a silent ally. Margaret stood beside me, her presence a lifeline. "You don't have to decide now," I said, my voice softening. "Go home. Think about what I mean to you, not what I can give, but who I am. I'll be here for now." They left their silence heavy with the weight of my words. Margaret stayed her hand on my shoulder. "You were incredible," she said. "You gave them a chance to see you." I gave myself a chance. I corrected my eyes on the key. It hadn't moved, but its presence was a promise of truths, yet to come of a strength I was only beginning to understand. The house settled around me, its shadows softer now, as if it knew I'd faced the hardest truth of all. I wasn't just dying. I was living fiercely for the first time in years. The house had been my silent partner through a journey of betrayal and awakening its creaks and shadows, guiding me toward truths I'd long buried. I stood in the living room, the brass key from the bookstore, now resting on the mantel, its ornate loop catching the soft November light like a quiet sentinel. It hadn't moved since I'd found David's letter in the attic safe, revealing his $847,000 gift and his regret for abandoning us 30 years ago. Yet its presence lingered, a subtle hum that seemed to whisper, "You've unlocked one truth, but the story isn't over." I was Sarah Mitchell, 62, a retired English teacher from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, who'd spent 35 years as the invisible foundation of my family's lives. The empty book launched the ledger of my sacrifices, $200,000 in financial support, a decade of unpaid childcare, the bold rewriting of my will, the confrontation with my family, and the revelation of my pancreatic cancer had forged a new woman. The key, with its mysterious migrations, had been a catalyst. But now, as I stood on the edge of a miracle, the house seemed to exhale, as if it knew my story was reaching its crescendo. 3 weeks had passed since I'd revealed my stage 3 pancreatic cancer to Marcus, Rachel, and Jessica, demanding genuine love over guilt-driven gestures. Their initial shock had given way to a flurry of efforts, visits, calls, questions about my favorite color, purple, my favorite restaurant, Greek, my dreams. Lily, Tommy, and Emma had sent handwritten letters, their childish scrawls filled with promises to visit more. But I wasn't naive. Were they here for me, or for the fear of losing me, the trust, the inheritance they'd assumed was theirs? The key on the mantel gleamed as if it held the answer. its stillness a quiet challenge to test their sincerity. The call from Dr. Ellis came on a crisp November morning, the sky outside my window, a tapestry of gold and crimson, the trees ablaze with autumn's final fire. "Sarah," he said, his voice trembling with disbelief, "your latest scans are extraordinary. The tumor has shrunk by 60%. It's not gone, but this is unprecedented. We're not talking months anymore. We're talking years, possibly." I sank into a chair, the phone trembling in my hand. "Years," I echoed the word, foreign, heavy with possibility. "It's a miracle," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "We'll need to monitor you closely, but this changes everything." The house creaked softly, a low rumble, as if it were exhaling in relief. A miracle. I'd stopped chemotherapy after one round, choosing quality over quantity, yet here I was, gifted with time I hadn't dared to hope for. The joy was overwhelming, but it was tempered by a question that gnawed at me. Would my family's newfound attention survive this miracle, or was it tethered to my impending death? The key on the mantel seemed to watch its silence, a challenge to find out. I invited Marcus, Rachel, Jessica, David, and my grandchildren to dinner that evening, a gathering I hadn't hosted since the book launch's Betrayal. The dining room, rarely used, was warm with the scent of roasted lamb and rosemary, a recipe from the Greek restaurant I loved, but they'd never bothered to learn about. I set the table with my mother's old china, the plates chipped, but cherished, and lit candles that cast a soft glow across the room. The house felt alive, its walls humming with a quiet approval, as if it knew this night would be a turning point. Lily, Tommy, and Emma arrived first, their laughter, a melody that filled the house with life. Lily ate and, sharp as a tack, hugged me tightly, her eyes bright. "Grandma, you look happier," she said, her voice clear and earnest. "Are you not lonely anymore?" Her words pierced me, a reminder of how even a child could see my isolation. "I'm working on it, sweetheart," I said, kissing her forehead, my heart swelling. Tommy and Emma chimed in, showing me drawings they'd made: a purple flower from Tommy, a stick figure family from Emma, with me in the center, not the edge. The adults followed, their faces a mix of hope and unease. Marcus carried a bouquet of purple tulips, a deliberate nod to my favorite color. Rachel held a homemade baklava, her eyes nervous but warm. Jessica's smile was cautious, and David, as always, lingered in the background, his silence a familiar shadow. We sat the table a stage for a new chapter. The house seemed to lean in, its shadows soft, as if it were listening. I raised my glass of wine, my voice steady. "I have news," I said, and their eyes locked on me, bracing for another revelation. "My tumor has shrunk by 60%. The doctors call it a miracle. I'm not dying anytime soon." The table erupted in gasps and tears. Rachel reached for my hand, her grip trembling. "Mom, that's incredible." "Oh my God, I'm so happy." Marcus's eyes shone, his voice thick with emotion. "Mom, it's amazing. You're going to be okay." Jessica's smile was cautious, her eyes searching mine. "Sarah, that's wonderful. What does this mean for—" Everything I knew what she meant. The trusts, the will the $847,000 David had left me. I set down my glass, the key's weight vivid in my memory, though it rested on the mantel now. "It means I have time to live the life I deserve." I said, my gaze steady. "But it also means I need to know why you're here. Is it because you thought I was dying, or because you want me in your lives?" The silence was heavy, the candlelight flickering as if the house itself were holding its breath. Marcus spoke, first, his voice raw. "Mom, when you told us about the cancer, I was terrified. I felt guilty, like we'd failed you. But these past weeks, spending time with you, learning about you, it's not about guilt anymore. It's about seeing you. Really seeing you." Rachel nodded, tears streaming down her face. I didn't know your favorite color was purple, Mom. I didn't know you loved Greek food or that you wrote poetry in college. I've been so caught up in my own life that I forgot you have one, too. I want to know you now, not because you're sick, but because you're my mom. Jessica's voice was quieter, less certain, but earnest. Sarah, I'm sorry for the spa day, for all of it. I didn't realize how much it hurt you. I want to do better, but I don't know how to start. I leaned back, my heart softening but resolute. Start by showing up, I said. Not for dinners or apologies, but for the small things. Call me to talk about your day. Ask me about mine. Know me as a person, not a role. Lily's voice piped up, small but clear. Grandma, I wrote you a letter. Like you said in the trust thing. Can I read it? I knotted my throat tight. She pulled a folded paper from her pocket, her words halting but sincere. Dear Grandma, I love when you read me stories. You make funny voices. I want to visit you more and learn about your book. Love, Lily. She looked up, her eyes wide. Is that enough? It's more than enough, I said, pulling her into a hug, tears stinging my eyes. Tommy and Emma chimed in, promising more drawings and visits, their innocence a balm to my heart. The adults watched, their faces a mix of shame and hope. Marcus cleared his throat, his voice steady, but vulnerable. Mom, about the will. We don't care about the money. Keep it, give it to Aunt Margaret, do whatever you want. We just want you. I studied them, searching for sincerity. The key on the mantel gleamed as if whispering, test them. Trust them, but test them. I believe you're trying, I said. But love isn't a moment, it's a habit. Keep showing up, and we'll see what kind of family we can be. The dinner continued, the tension easing into laughter and stories. Marcus asked about my writing process, his questions tentative but genuine. Rachel shared a memory of me reading to her as a child, her voice soft with nostalgia. Jessica ventured a question about my favorite book, her effort awkward but real. David, still quiet, nodded along, his eyes meeting mine for the first time in years. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start, a fragile, hopeful start. That night after they left, I stood before the mantel, the key in my hand. The house was quiet now, its shadow soft as if it had exhaled its secrets. The key hadn't moved since the safe, but its role was clear. It had unlocked David's letter. But more than that, it had unlocked me, the woman I'd buried beneath decades of sacrifice. The cancer wasn't gone, but it no longer defined me. The miracle wasn't just the shrinking tumor, it was the awakening of my family, however imperfect, and the reclamation of my own worth. I placed the key beside a photo of myself alone, smiling in a purple dress, centered for the first time. The house settled, its silence warm as if it knew my story was complete, not an ending but a beginning. I wasn't just a mother or a grandmother. I was Sarah, a writer, a dreamer, a woman who'd faced betrayal and emerged whole. The key's mystery had been a guide, not to a physical door, but to a truth: I was enough. And as the candlelight flickered, casting soft shadows across the room, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years, a quiet triumph, a relaxing exhale into a life I was finally ready to live.